What is your freedom worth to you? Each of our guests had a light bulb moment. They longed to live rather than merely exist. They smashed through their fears and programmed minds, trusting themselves, their faith, and their survival instincts, leaving the guilt, fear, oppression, and drudgery of their past for a brighter future. They took a brave and courageous step into freedom. This is their story of how they got a life. Welcome to Get a Life Podcast, Ex-Cult Conversations. You matter, and so does your story.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Get a Life Podcast, Ex-Cult Conversations. Today, we are here with Lane and our special guest, Martina. Martina is Alona Lyons' daughter, who in May, they will have left the PBCC for 6 years. Welcome, Martina. We are so glad that you sent a message and asked to come on, as your mom's podcast, as you know, kind of blew up and within 24 hours had over 1,000 views already. So we know that it had an impact in there. So very grateful that you came on here. I'm going to hand the mic over to you and just let the viewers and listeners know where you're from and take us along on your journey.
Hi, my name is Martina Sharp. As Cheryl said, I am Jerry and Alona Lyons' daughter. I'm currently living in Lancaster, Minnesota, which is about a half-hour drive from them, so I'm still pretty close to home. But yeah, after seeing my mom's podcast, I kind of realized that there was a lot of stuff that she didn't get to touch on just because our perspectives are so different. So I kind of wanted to show the same story from my point of view. We left on my 15th birthday.
Oh, wow.
So, well, that was kind of, as you probably heard her talk about, that was kind of the day that my dad missed the very last morning meeting. And that was kind of it. But yeah, so 15 years old is a very tumultuous time for any teenage girl. So I definitely struggled the most out of all of us kids, for sure, just because of my age. You know, like you're so delicate at that age, and then to be thrown into a brand new world, it was hard to try and figure out who I was as a person, and then also as a person that's not brethren anymore. So that was a big change, but yeah, I was in the Brethren school from 3rd grade when they brought you in your little school uniforms, up until the last quarter of my 9th grade. That school is not something I would wish on my worst enemy, to be frank.
Wow.
It was absolutely the worst experience of my life by far. I struggled a lot with, being bullied, and towards the end of my time there, a lot of the kids knew, and a lot of, their parents were talking. They knew that we were questioning. So I spent the majority of my days literally sitting and staring at walls. I didn't do any of my schoolwork. I ate lunch by myself. So when I transferred schools, I had a 14% in math class. Probably, I think it was like around a 10 to 14% in Spanish, 23% in business class. I was absolutely failing everything. When I finally got transferred over, I did 1 quarter in public school of my 9th grade. And I remember I would wear leggings and a skirt over top, and I'd walk into the building, and the first thing I'd do is run to the bathroom and take that skirt off so fast. And that was pretty crazy, but instantly my grades started going up. It was very clear that it was not anything wrong with me, but with the school. And obviously, of course, I was feeling a little bit more hopeful. So I was definitely caring and putting some effort into my schoolwork at that point. But I ended up graduating high school with high honors and a 3.9 GPA.
Wow. Congratulations. That's incredible.
Yeah. During 10th grade, I found out that most of my credits could not transfer over. They were fighting with the Brethren School, trying to pull stuff over. They were asking for textbooks so they could at least see what I had learned to try and give me some of my credits. But the Brethren School wouldn't give them, or obviously a lot of the classes didn't even have textbooks. So I ended up having to redo my 9th grade year. I did it online, and I finished it during my senior year. I was doing Algebra 1 and college algebra at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Just to get everything done. So
some of the subjects, basically, they couldn't even provide the text for to give you the credits at the new school?
They wouldn't provide them for some reason. And I mean, they couldn't,
Yeah. I wonder if some of them was like science and stuff too, right? Which they love to skip around.
Science was a big one. Yep, that they were trying to get the textbook for, and they wouldn't give it. And if I remember right, I mean, it was like this thick. I don't think we ever opened it, and it very clearly it wasn't up to standards because they didn't want to give it over. But yeah, even my gym class was the credit wouldn't go. So
wow, that really shows how their schools really aren't up to par. One other question I had when you were talking there is, can you tell listeners a little bit too about the differences you probably saw in students being at the Brethren School and then being at public school?
The disrespect is absolutely astonishing. Being in an environment in the public school where the classrooms were quiet, and the teachers weren't, getting walked all over, like that was night and day difference. It was crazy to see. I mean, the students ran the Brethren School, absolutely. Certain students were 100% in charge. They could do no wrong. The teachers had absolutely no power to stop them. And yeah, being in a public school where the students are respectful, everybody's quiet, you're able to learn and ask questions, like that was the hugest difference for sure.
Did you find that accountability was different in a public school versus the OSG, the OneSchool Global of the PBCC?
Yeah, for sure.
And when you were struggling with your grades, what kind of things were offered to you to help you?
There wasn't anything. There was one teacher who I absolutely love to this day. She's my favorite teacher, that really cared. She would bring my mom in and we'd have our little parent teacher conferences, and she would be like, I see what's going on. I know you don't care. Cause my thing is I wouldn't even do the assignments. Like my head was so messed up at that point. I was in such a fog that I didn't care about school one bit. But she would come in and she's like, I know you don't care, whatever. And we would sit there and she would actually pray with us. And that's what we do during our parent teacher conferences. But at that point, it was like the only way to really fix it would be to get out. And at that point, I was the only one left in the Brethren School. And that's for me when it got very bad. My brother was transferred over to public school when he was in 5th grade. So I believe I would have been in 8th grade. And then my little sister did her 5th grade in the public school as well. And that would have been my 9th grade year. So my whole 9th grade, I was the only one of my siblings in the Brethren School. So I was the only one that had to wear the uniforms. I was the only one that had to go to school till basically July. And I was the only one that was in there dealing with, everything that they were doing. So that was really hard for me.
So what do you think was the biggest factor in you not being able to want to be there or finish your assignments? Was it the bullying, or was it that there was just no support, or was it all of it?
It was all of it, for sure. The problem was that at this point, people knew that there was something off. Mm-hmm. Like they knew. I had definitely said some things, where we would have conversations about Mr. Hales when we were on, study hall or whatever. And I would say things like, do you seriously believe that? Or like, I'm not listening to that, and then kids started picking up on it. And I can't remember what I said, but I remember I said something about, why are we all listening to Mr. Hales? Something along those lines. The whole room went quiet. And that was when I realized I needed to really keep my mouth shut if I was going to survive. Mm-hmm. So after that was when I shut down completely. And I just, like I said, I would literally go there. Their whole school system is based on that self-directed learning. So basically the teachers were there to give you homework, not really teach you. And then it was mostly study halls, like all day. So I wouldn't do the work. Didn't really have anything to try and even teach myself the work. Google.com was blocked. So, I sat there and I stared at the walls and I didn't talk to anybody because at that point they were really catching on. And I remember one time I was walking to the printer to get something. And I walked through the hallway and all their walls are glass. All the school walls were glass. And one of the church elders was there, and I walked back to the classroom. He came and he pulled me out and he screamed at me in the middle of the hallway. Everybody could see, everybody could hear, but this was probably a month or two before my parents finally took me out. And what he was screaming didn't even make sense. I hadn't done anything. All I'd done was walk to the printer, but it turned into like, you need to grow up. You need to act your age. Like he screamed at me till there was tears running down his face.
And this is a PBCC elder?
Yeah, he was one of the older gentlemen in the church. Mm-hmm. I just call them elders now because it's the easiest way to explain them.
Yeah.
But at that point, I don't even know how he was connected to the school other than he would sometimes come in to be one of the lunch monitors. I don't know.
So in other words, you have a random civilian inside an educational institution screaming at children. Why are the police not called? He's not a teacher. He doesn't have any educational degree. He doesn't even probably have pastoral training in any sense.
No. And it was because at that point they were scared, and they knew where my family was going. And I don't know if it was like some last ditch effort. I don't understand it, but yeah, there was literally tears running down his face. And I held myself together to the end of the day, but I came home and I cried because that was, I mean, number one, it's terrible to just get screamed at, but for everyone to be able to see it mm-hmm. and you have like no idea what the heck just happened. That was pretty bad. So after that,
especially at the age that you're at, that's such a delicate age. It is such an age where you're trying to figure out who you are, where you fit in. You're building such a core part of your self-esteem, right? Mm-hmm. My heart breaks for you having to experience that. And I mean, this isn't the first story where we've heard of these incidents. It's one of our first times we've had someone on here from OSG be able to tell the story of how they were treated in there. So we appreciate this.
Yeah.
And just to make a point about these schools really quick, is in the normal world, what you do is you have an educational institution, a school, right? And you educate to a higher degree the people that are teaching the lower education level, right? Like high school or elementary school. So in other words, if you only have elementary school, you probably shouldn't teach elementary school. If you only have high school, you probably shouldn't teach high school, right? You have one up to teach one below. So brethren members, elders, being involved in OneSchool Global is a high school graduate at most trying to facilitate a high school, right? They don't have the education to do this. They should not be involved in these schools at all. They're not smart enough. They're not.
Yep.
They're uneducated.
Yeah. And I think that kind of brings up the point of it's hardly a school. I don't think it's hardly there to be a school other than for legal reasons. Kids are supposed to go to school. They don't care about what you're learning, especially the girls. Being a female, I mean, your job is to graduate high school, work, get married, have kids. I mean, you're not there to contribute to the business in any sort of way. Your only contribution is to cook and have babies. So that was, I mean, another part. I remember arguing with my best friend about that. Like, I wanted to go to college very badly. And this is when my whole family was questioning things. And she was about the only person that I felt kind of comfortable, at least arguing my point of view with. And I told her, I was like, I want to go to college so I don't have to, you know, be a woman in here and cooking and cleaning and having kids. Like, she's like, well, you can still work and stay brethren. And I'm like, I don't want to sit in an office all day, which ironically is what I do now. But it's my
you
choice.
Get to choose that. Exactly. It's your choice.
And she was like, well, if you don't want to be in an office, you can drive a forklift. I'm like, there's people that I'm like, I'm not driving a forklift. Like, I want to do something with my life. I don't want to be just a wife and raise kids and stay at home and cook. I hate cooking. Like, I never ever fit the bill to be a brethren wife ever.
In other words, you wanted to make your own life instead of having a pre-planned book handed to you, be like, this is your life.
Yeah. Yep. My dreams were way too high for their standards. But
which is good.
Yes.
So what was the reaction when you said these kind of things, you know, that you wanted to go on?
I do remember saying a lot of bad things about Mr. Hales to her. She was the only friend I had left. And about probably 2 months before we actually left, I was told that she couldn't speak to me anymore. So that was a big whole mess. After we left, she wrote this giant, like 9-page letter. And my grandma was working at the public school. She gave it to my grandma, and my grandma gave it to me. And at the very end, it said, do not contact me unless you want help coming back. And I threw it away. And I did not contact her again, ever. And maybe 3 years later, I think I was like the beginning of my senior year, I get an email from her. And she's like, I'm sorry, all this stuff. I want to apologize. Do you think that I could call you? I was like, we can meet in person, because I knew she absolutely wouldn't do that. And of course, yeah, she wouldn't do that. But yeah, I think she ended up calling me, trying to apologize. It was like, too little, too late. You're not going to try and get me to come back. Like, this isn't going to work. And then I blocked every form of communication that she still had with me. But yeah, that was the last kind of real interaction I've had with any brethren.
It's really painful to interact with them, right? Like I've done it over the years, you know, like reach back out to my family, try and send them emails, try and be nice to them, listen, you know, read their stuff sometimes, not that they sent much, but, you know, talking to some ex-member recently, and, you know, he's like, I hate my family. It's like, I've no love for them anymore. And he explained it, you know, he's 70 years old now. And he explained how he's like, they haven't been a part of his life in so long They don't ever ask how he is or any kind of thing in his life. So is there any connection? Should he say that he loves them? It's like loving someone who's already dead. There's no necessarily connection back, right? So when we like sometimes I think about it like this, like sometimes you hear true crime documentaries, right, about terrible things that happen to children, right? Or Cheryl, your case, right? Now, let's say it's a family. Now, is it good to stay in touch with that family? Or is it better for that person to be completely separated from an abusive family, right? So sometimes, and it's not always family, it's sometimes members of church or whatever it is, but sometimes your life is really better not having them in it, as hard as that is to say, but really not having anything to do with them. Sometimes, not for everybody, but sometimes that is the best thing.
I think the thing is how that cult is set up with the separation rule is that there are no genuine, authentic friendships and relationships, right? They are so trained and indoctrinated to, at the first sign of someone not believing or someone questioning, you find out very fast those friendships aren't true. Even the connections we have within our family, they're not true. They're not authentic. They are governed. That's what makes this cult a cult, is because even your own family, even your own best friends are not authentic. I am so sorry that you had to go through that. But I mean, like most of us that have gone out here, right? It's just heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching having to go through the aftermath of choosing something different.
It's like rejection, right? Because like in a way they reject you for who you are, just on you like not believing. Like in this case, right? Like your friend can be your best friend in the world, but if you say, I don't believe in Bruce Hales anymore, they just like that, right? Like a switch in the brain can just go, I can't even hear those words. Those words, they're just so awful and insane. They can't even be friends with you anymore. And in the normal world, if let's say a Jewish person was sitting down with their friend and their friend said, I'm thinking of converting to Christianity, the person would not lose their minds like they do in the Brethren. The Brethren act like you are joining a terrorist organization. When you say, I no longer believe in Bruce Hales, it is like to a normal person saying, I'm going to fight for ISIS, right? I want to go do evil, terrible, wicked things. And it's like, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know, like my mom mentioned that, taking us away from our grandparents and our cousins and our family was like one of the hardest parts for her. But honestly, that was not the hardest part. Like, I did miss them, but I do not anymore. Like saying the word grandpa or grandma is so foreign to me. It's super hard to miss them, honestly. Like I think I'm mostly just angry now. But that was definitely not the hardest part for me, because it's like, yes, they're our family, but
but they don't feel like it after right. The way they treat you when you change your
absolutely.
Mind about something.
Family doesn't do that, So for me, that was definitely not the hardest part. I think the hardest part was probably just, pretty much everything else. Like senior year, I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was in kindergarten. So it is something that I've struggled with my entire life. I had been on medication from kindergarten up until we left. And then around the time we were leaving, and after we left, I also was diagnosed with, severe depression. I was on depression medication up until the time we left. And it was really hard, to see, like, my mom, I would see her crying and I would be crying, but
how did you get back up on your feet after leaving? Because that's a huge transition for you. That was a massive transition for you, like you said, at that age. Let's try and give some hope to those teenagers in there. I mean, we have teenagers at that age, 15, 16, who are looking at leaving when they reach 18. What kind of advice would you give to them for making that transition? How did you get through some of those very tough emotional obstacles?
Honestly, therapy. Senior year, I really wanted to go to prom, and mom said the only way that you are going to prom is if you agree to go to therapy.
Awesome.
But reluctantly, I said yes. I still go to therapy at least once a month. I still notice when I don't go. But that made the biggest change. And even my husband will say that from the time he met me to now, like there's a huge difference. So I highly, highly recommend going to therapy for sure. Don't even try to interact. Just cut them off. That was when I really started to heal, was when I decided, you know, I'm blocking my grandparents' numbers. They don't want to talk to me. I don't need to talk to them. Nothing healthy is coming from this. So just kind of making very conscious decisions to cut out the things that are negatively impacting you. And then finding good friends and really, you know, just relying on the people that have your best interest at heart, for sure. For me, it would be my family. Like, I stuck close to my family, but these, you know, a lot of them, if they do want to leave at 18, they're probably not going to have that. So just, you know, I guess another thing you could do is find a good church. I'm not a huge fan of church. I'm definitely a believer in God, but still stepping through, you know, going to church, hearing all the sounds, like I can't do it. I was diagnosed with PTSD right after going to therapy. So for a long time, it was like everything was a trigger. You know, I would sit in school, I'd open my pencil case and I'd be like, whoa, that feels like they're Bibles, you know. But definitely 100% worth it. Even through every single bad thing that happened there and even afterwards, there was not a single moment where I ever thought, man, I really wish I wouldn't have left. Like, that was ever even a thought in my mind. It is 100%.
And did you find extracurricular activities helped you? Like, what did you do to, because at that age, that's super important, right? That, and in the outside world, had not been inside a cult, coming out, age 15 is a time where you're really discovering a lot of who you are creatively, extracurricular activities, social skills. How did you navigate that? What did you jump into?
Horses. Absolutely 100% saved my life. When I was 14, there was some horses right down the road, just out of town, and I would ride my bike out there and I would pet them. And, you know, one day the owner came out and she's like, you want to brush them? You want to help me feed them? And then I started riding my bike out there every single day.
I love it.
She taught me so much, and I am forever grateful to that family. I ended up buying my first horse, which was one of those ones that I was taking care of. I bought her from that girl, and I still have her. She's right out my window.
Wow.
But there is absolutely no way that I would have been able to do this without horses. For sure, they were my saving grace. The one thing that made me smile, and I remember actually telling my mom that one day when she told me I couldn't go out there, I had to probably clean the house or something, but I was like, you're not going to take away the one thing that makes me smile anymore. And I think I probably broke her heart when I said that. But it was true at that point, because we were still in. And yeah, I would go and hide my bike if I needed to when I was out there, because, you know, probably shouldn't be talking to worldly people. But yeah, so definitely were the one thing that pulled me through.
And looking back at when you left and to where you are now, what do you think is the biggest thing that you feel you've gained from having the courage to leave and be able to do what you're doing and pursuing your dreams? What is the biggest thing that, like, what would you say to that 15-year-old self as she's walking out that door? What would you say to her?
You're going to find peace. You are going to have everything you ever thought you could ever want. And you're going to be happy. That's probably the main thing is peace. Like, I'm sitting here, I'm wearing pants, I'm in my own house, I have horses, I have dogs. I'm wearing earrings. Like, that's just crazy. I think the biggest thing I probably gained was peace. Like, my heart was in turmoil for so many years. Just watching my parents go through it and then, trying to find myself, trying to learn the real world with a mom that's trying to learn the real world. That was hard because she was about the same age as I was, when it comes to real world experience. So she was trying to learn how to parent a teenager without ever having to be a teenager herself.
And I think that's the message that I want to give to those listeners inside the Brethren still, right? Like, you're just this perfect example that shows how you're able to pick up the trauma from being inside a cult and still make so much of your life, right? This isn't an easy task. It's not an easy task. But with the right tools and the right guidance and I understand the horse thing. I actually worked at a barn. My daughter had a horse, and it's the most magical healer there is out there. Is being able. Animals are such a therapy all in themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And for that to not be a part of their life inside there is such a disgrace to what children need, what teenagers need. There's nothing like having a bad day and you come home and an animal sits on your lap, an animal runs to you, you get to tend to an animal. The regulation that your nervous system gets from it is a regulation that everybody should have a choice to have.
Mm-hmm. Especially when on the flip side, they absolutely discourage getting any sort of mental health help in the first place. So not only do you not really get to rely on therapy or medication, they take away both things, So I know
they really damage people like that, right? Like, I think it's very damaging to not allow interaction with pets. I think that's really weird and twisted, trying to say that it takes away your love from Jesus, but the pet's actually there, right? And the other thing they don't allow too, that I think breaks down some mental health stuff is sports, right?
Yeah.
So there's no team effort in sports, or sense of belonging to like a small group and things like that. I mean, they got the big group, they got the church, right? But sportsmanship is a huge thing. And they don't allow that at all. Competitiveness in sports, athleticism, just completely ignored.
Yeah, that's one thing I will probably regret a little bit, is that I didn't join any sports when I got into the public school. I kind of just assumed it was a little too late for me because I didn't even know what basketball hardly was. So to go from, not knowing what it was to playing it proficiently in 2-3 years, it was like, whatever. I've got my horses. I was working at the time too. So, but yeah, I know, like, my little sister's in volleyball and it has been absolutely awesome for her. Just the teamwork and getting to do those things and work towards something and see yourself getting better at it. Like it's so fun to watch her. And it makes me sad that they don't get to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the first things that you tried, being a teenager and coming out?
Oh boy. I tried to do the teenager things, but at that point, my mom was still very much like kind of trying to shelter us because she didn't know how it was going to work. So besides, the obvious, like wearing pants in public and hanging out with friends, some, but not a lot. I don't know. And I had already had the horses at that point. So I went to a concert.
Oh,
that was
a concert.
I joined the youth group in town. I started going before we left. I had one of the girls that when she would drive through our back alley and I'd sneak out the back door and hop in her car and she'd take me to youth group. So that was fun. I learned a lot. At that church, they would do fundraising, and all the kids that were of age to be able to go would fundraise for this week-long youth conference down in Kansas City. And while they were doing the fundraising, I was going to the youth group, but we weren't out at the time, so I knew I wasn't going to be able to go. And all of their fundraising was like church meals and stuff. Of course, I couldn't be at the church in the broad daylight. So I didn't get to do any of the fundraising, but we ended up leaving that May. The conference was in July. And so even though we were out, I wasn't going to get to go. But somebody from the church anonymously funded my ticket. So I got to go on that trip. And to this day, I still have no idea who it was, but that trip absolutely changed my life. I learned so much. I still felt really weird because it was a youth, like a giant youth group, a nationwide youth group. I learned a lot about God, but I still felt really weird because it was like a new Bible and they were so farther advanced than I was, and like knowing about Jesus and God. Like I mean, it's funny because they call themselves a Christian church, but I didn't know the first thing about it, like at all. Like who's Mary? I have no idea. So that was weird, but very, very, very life-changing. I actually ran out of my anxiety medication on that trip, and when I got back, I never went back on it.
Wow.
That was the end.
That's incredible.
My doctor actually said, he's like, I don't think you need medicine. I think you just need horses. So that was the end of that. But that trip was incredible. And just, I didn't want to go on it. I was really nervous. But I'm very, very glad I did. And I'm very, very glad that someone was generous enough to put forward that money for me to go, because absolutely life-changing.
Probably really helped in your transition later, right? To see that there was other normal people out there, normal Christians.
Yes, it did. It did. It made it, I would say it probably helped a lot, because I went with a group of girls that were some of them were in my class. They went to the same school as I did. So it was also kind of a good way for me to bond with them and get to know them. And then I think it made school a little easier too, but it took me out of my shell a lot at the very beginning. Cause that was 2 months post leaving. So it was a big deal.
Going back to OSG, what would you say to them if you were able to sit down with somebody in OSG and they actually listen to you? What would you go back and tell them? What would you say not to the teachers, but okay, maybe it is to the teachers, but more so to the brethren that are so governing how the teachers respond to things, to the bullying that happened in there? What would your advice be going back, and what would you want to say to them?
I'd probably say a lot of swear words first. But kind of just like open your eyes, focus on the kids, not so much your businesses. Like, give them sports. Stop segregating the males and females. That's the most awful idea ever. Luckily, that happened after I was out of there. But take advice from a public school. Like, see how they run things and, give them textbooks. Yeah, there's a lot of advice that they should be taking.
Do you think that it's possible for OSG to become a properly run school with the hierarchy that runs within the PBCC?
No.
Yeah, I agree.
Definitely not. No. Somehow the people that they hire that stick around are, I don't know how to explain it, but I know like one of our superintendents was like so buddied up with them, he was trying to join the church.
Wow.
So they hire this people with very similar minds, and then they're so easy to just mold and control. So unless they're going to college themselves and getting teaching degrees, there's not really any chance. Any teacher that is a good teacher leaves. I know some that worked there that said, like, I'm going to stay here for the kids until I cannot physically handle it anymore. And they have since left.
Well, I feel like these teachers join an education or get an education career because they want to educate children, right? And, like the word misinformation, right? Disinformation. Well, it's miseducation, what brethren try and make the teachers teach, right? They try and dictate what the teachers are allowed to teach because of their narrow, uneducated views.
Yep.
It's catastrophic how they run their schools. I worked with kids for 12 years, and it is very near and dear to my heart. I homeschooled my children. It breaks my heart that they run the schools the way they do. And I mean, they run it because it fits their mold. But I just think of all the children inside these schools that have dreams and aspirations to be a part of the puzzle that's out here to help heal and fix some of the problems we have here. They're stuck in there and they don't get to get that education to be able to be a part of the bigger puzzle that we're looking for, right? To me, every human fits a puzzle. And yet we have these cults that are created that keep these children completely confined and closed in to becoming their full potential. Yet, what if one of those children in there are here to bring the next level of healing, say for cancer or for diabetes, or, the geniuses are in there. We've heard the teachers talk about them. The geniuses are in there. And it's just, like I said, it's catastrophic at how they are allowed to legally run the schools that they're running.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense because, you'd think that if they were the one true chosen church with all the perfect people in it, they would just be full of Einsteins and Gandhis and, Stephen Hawkins. And you know what I mean? They would just be like overflowing with the brainiest and smartest people in the world. But I haven't heard of an invention coming out of the PBCC other than pyramid scams ever.
Yeah. And that's, there is Einsteins in there, and there is, I was talking to a woman that taught there, and she mentioned one particular girl. She's like, she absolutely has every bit of potential in her to be like a doctor, a brain surgeon. Like, she's incredible. But yeah, she's gonna just graduate, go to work for a few years and get married and have kids and cook. and
that's why I hope if there's some teenagers in there, they're listening to Martina's story today and realizing that, there's a life outside and it's much happier, and you don't have to grow up to be, just a stay-at-home wife that has brethren babies. That is not the top of your potential, and neither is a brethren boy thinking that he has to run a business, in his future. That is not the top of your potential. There is so many more millions of things you can do in your life, right? Listen to this story.
Going back to the bullying that you encountered, what attempts did you guys do to try and conquer the bullying or to address the bullying?
I didn't do anything. When it came down to it, they turned it around and I was the bully. I was actually terrorizing people, according to one of the teachers. Well, actually, no, she was the principal. She emailed my mom and I was terrorizing a student. And my mom's like, can you please give me some examples? And I'd have to find the email again, but it was something along the lines of saying, no, I don't think that's right, to a particular student, and not doing things the way she wants them done. And there's, your example of the students kind of run the situation. So, yeah.
And that's terrible for those students, because life's going to punch them right in the face later,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's just going to really, really hurt later in life when when you grow up in a school thinking that you just run the shit, right? And that things bend to your way. Woo!
Yep.
Boy, oh boy, I feel bad for them.
Yeah. Nope. And this teacher that I was talking to, I mean, she said that girl that I was terrorizing ran the school up until she graduated, which I 100% believe. But yeah, so I was so low on the totem pole that, I mean, towards the end, since I wasn't really talking, there was nobody that was really giving me crap other than the guy that came in and screamed at me to grow up and act my age. I don't know, apparently whatever I did at the printer was terrible. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of hid.
Did you ever come across anybody who had been sexually abused throughout your school, or no?
I knew of some things. I encountered a little bit of it when I was really little. But I've heard more since I've left about what's been going on in the school since then, just from teachers and stuff. And a lot of it is like, even like incest, like siblings, and yeah, gross.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you segregate males and females that much, they don't know how to act. So,
well, and the teachings aren't there in the education system too, right?
Right. Yeah. Like those this before, we didn't have a science textbook. We had one where the whole biology section was just taped off. I mean, you couldn't read it. They covered it up.
All of biology? That's a whole
learning about
science. You can't just delete biology.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole female reproduction system, nothing, the sperm and the egg, it didn't exist. Like, you didn't learn about any of that. I remember we would go on field trips pretty often, and we went to I think it was like a human rights museum, which I think is hilarious now thinking about it. You take a cult to a human rights museum.
Very ironic.
Yes, but they brought chaperones just to stand in front of the gay section so no kids would walk in there. Like the gay rights. They had chaperones stand in front of there so no one would walk in.
We heard about this. It is mind-blowing that you have to be that ignorant to not to be at a human rights museum and then be like, I'm not allowed to look at part of it.
Yeah,
something's wrong there.
And I hope, again, here's another point I just want to point out to the listeners inside there, is the absolute ironic behavior of that. You're at a human rights museum, but not allowing the rights of a human to be seen. Right? It just doesn't make sense. It's such hypocrisy of, I really think that the school system within there, I mean, they are trying. I've heard they've brought an anti-bullying system since we've brought out these podcasts. There's like these safeguarding things every household had to do, but they're very, very vague. They're very check the box, and it's more for a show for the government to keep their schools going versus it actually having a purpose and dealing with an issue. And that's what is sad about all of this, is that their solutions are never to deal with an issue. Their solutions are always, how do we cover this up? How do we keep this so the government is still funding? How do we keep our charity status? Everything is always for show versus it being a solution.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I don't know whether to laugh or be really mad when I see things like RRT posting their kids dressed up in Santa costumes. Like, what is that?
Or celebrating Halloween. Yeah.
Yes. Like, that's 100% for show. Like that. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. It's mind blowing.
So you're talking about how you had seen other things that were different perceptions with your mom. What else was there that was different that you viewed than your mom viewed?
She talked about, crying, being really depressed. I saw that. I saw all of it. I would see her go downstairs to a room we never used, and she would just sit and cry. And at that point, I was probably maybe 12 or maybe even younger. And I just remember just feeling so bad, and I didn't understand any of it.
This is before you guys left then?
Yep. This would be before I left. And this was when she was definitely questioning it. I always knew that she was questioning it. And she would always say, like, what they just said in that meeting, do not listen to it. Or she'd be getting us ready for the meetings, and she'd be like, just don't even listen. So I think I was pretty lucky. I would say I didn't really get brainwashed because of her being proactive and kind of, telling us things like that. But I remember when they really started trying to make an effort into getting the ball rolling so we could leave. I was working at the grocery store, so I would have been 14. And I, at this point, was pretty involved with everything that was happening. And she had told me that Dad might be able to get a job. And if he was able to get this job, it would mean that we were going to leave. And I remember it was like the day where we were going to hear. And I was working at the grocery store, just, beeping things. And she texted me and she said that the job fell through. Mm. And I was devastated. I 100% thought we had absolutely missed our chance and we were never going to get out. Like, that was our one shot and we missed it. I was really mad that we couldn't just leave, because I didn't understand the whole money aspect of it, having to have your finances in order, all that stuff. All I knew is I wanted to be out. So that was kind of now I understand it, and I wish that I wouldn't have been so angry at her sometimes, when we couldn't just leave.
So you were 15, when you left. What 15-year-old that's been inside a cult understands the process and the responsibilities that a mother's going through? You wouldn't understand it,
No, but that was I was old enough to like be involved in the decisions, but I wasn't old enough to really understand why they were being made. So I was very upset. And I remember I was like trying not to cry, and there was people coming in, and I was like trying not to cry as I was checking them out. And that was a very, very hard day. But everything ended up working out, and we actually got to leave pretty quickly after that. With this new job. And yeah.
Did any relatives besides your grandparents try and reach out to you after?
No. My uncle would come to our house occasionally before my parents were actually finally kicked out. He did tell me I should work at the post office. And I was like, there is no way in hell you're going to come in here and tell me to work a government job when you're not even allowed to work a government job. Like, or he one day told me I should be a nurse. I'm like, buddy, you can't even go to college. Yeah. Like, why are you telling me what to do with my life? Like, you can have some sort of opinion when you decide you're actually going to be in it. Like, so yeah, I was really mad. I think that was the first day, or maybe the only time I've ever actually like raised my voice at him.
That's a real trait, a very misogynistic trait the men from the PBCC have in and out. I think it's a hard trait to leave. We talk to a lot of insiders in there, and I find sometimes the men very hard to talk to. They don't realize how misogynistic they're being towards comments that they make to me, right? And it is very triggering for me. I've had to take breaks because they don't understand when they are telling you to do something, or this is the way that you should do it. It comes across so misogynistic. It just doesn't have any ounce of a variable for your own choice in it, right? It just comes across as like, well, this is just what you should do. And it does. It just sears through your body, and you're like, oh man, I forgot. You forget how the men are just in control in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
I think it's a behavior and a trait for any of the men that have left or are in there, that you need to learn how to listen to yourself. Listen to, like, am I given this female, or am I given this woman that I'm speaking to an opportunity? Am I saying it in a way that gives this woman an opportunity to still have her own choice? That's what it comes down to, is that you are not above us, right? A man is not above a female. And I will say that very firmly, that is the one thing that needs to change. We are equals. We walk hand in hand. I have a 50% of a voice, just like you have 50% of a voice. And I think if we're going to get anywhere in this movement, we have to understand that. We've got to realize that females have just as much of a say as a man does.
I think it's deeply ingrained in the brother misogyny. And like, we are like just that saying alone fucking grinds my gears. Head of a household. What is that? What is that? The decider? I'm sorry. I hate that term. The brethren were all about that. My dad would say that all the time. I'm the head of the household. I make the shots in here. Why? What to do? Like, pants. Exactly. Right.
The women pants.
But in the brethren, it's just so prevalent. Didn't they say recently in a video or something that brethren can female members can own businesses or own businesses? And it's like, what? There's two, you know?
Would you say, Martina, that that's one of the things that you are very grateful for, is having your own voice? And maybe, you're married, you're expecting, you're in this whole new world. What is that like, being in a relationship and a marriage outside of the PBCC after watching what your parents went through?
It feels absolutely, light years different. Obviously, I was never married in the brethren.
Yeah.
But just like, I mean, I got married in Vegas. Like,
That's awesome.
you know, and I mean, we had talked about, when we had talked about our wedding, we had talked about, you know, if we were going to do something for the family. And I was like, I don't have any family to come. So the only time I thought about my grandma was after we had just gotten married. And I was like, I wonder what she'd think if she knew I got married in Sin City. Like, that's the biggest, like, F you. But I mean, yeah, I get to make choices. I got to marry who I wanted. I mean, the difference in the men is crazy. Like, he is the most loving, kind, helpful. Like, you don't see those traits in the brethren men at all. I mean, he would never, ever, ever, ever tell me I'm the head of the household. Like, I would laugh if he did, honestly. Like, it's never worked like that. We've always been very 50-50. Like,
partners. Yeah.
I actually bought this house before we were engaged or anything. So it was my house. I asked him to move in with me. I mean, so that was very empowering too. Like, you know, to be able to own my own property. And, you know, that's not something that a lot of brethren women would get to say, especially at 20 years old. Like,
yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
And when is your baby due?
We are due February 29th. It's a leap day.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And sitting back and looking at the gifts that you're going to, and the opportunities you're going to be able to give this child, like, what are the biggest moments you're looking forward to and being grateful for leaving the PBCC now that you're pregnant?
I am very, very, very grateful that I will be able to give my child 2 wonderful sets of grandparents that will never, ever not be in her life. That is a huge thing. She's going to have family. She's going to get to wear pants. Very excited for that. I'm so excited to do things like celebrate Christmas, things like that. I mean, it's super exciting. I'm very excited for her to be able to have everything that I could not have as a child because of that. A dog.
That's awesome.
I'm gonna have a dog.
And that's the biggest thing that we as mothers, like, I found the same thing of what I was able to give my children. And you look at these babies and you're like, wow, the gratitude when that baby is placed in your arms of being able to give it everything that you didn't get makes it that much sweeter. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much, Martina, for coming on. We really appreciate you sharing your stories and being able to open up a door of opportunities to those that are listening from inside, because we know that they're going to be listening to this. Your mom's podcast was absolutely hit the fan inside there. And I think it's really important that they hear your story coming from the age of 15 and being able to overcome what you overcame, because most of our issues stem from being inside such an isolated, indoctrinated cult that when you finally get out and you get the therapy, I'm a huge, huge advocate of therapy. I still go every 2 weeks. It is possible, these opportunities and you have the ability to be able to shake it off and gain the tools to be able to create a magnificent life out here. And you are the perfect example of someone who left at 15, being able to get married, get her house, find the things that light your soul on fire, and to live what we're supposed to be living on this planet. This is what it's all about. This is, you still believe in God. I mean, you might not be going to church every Sunday, but it hasn't affected your faith in the sense that you still are who you are. You just get to be the brighter picture of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Until next time, much love to everybody.
If you are in a high-demand religious group and need help, please go to oliveleaf.network. To share your story or be a guest on the show, email info.getalife@proton.me. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to Get a Life, and comment.